look, you guys have recommended me this video by Bellula. Really, I like Bellula a lot. I really do. I rate his content extremely highly and extremely... I'll say his content's very fair. He reports on stuff as it is, how it is, and how it's going to go, so... If you guys want to support him, please go and watch the video yourselves. I've put the video in the description for those of you on YouTube, for those of you in chat. Video is Highguard, just did what AAA can't. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Let's get on with it.
Okay, everyone, it's about time we talked about Highguard because a lot has happened. Though first, there's one number that really...
Why can you guys not hear this? There we go.
Stuck out, and that is 18%, because 18% is how...
I have never seen overwhelmingly negative attached to a Steam game. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I've seen it like maybe 2 or 3 times. That's 2 or 3 times. Overwhelmingly negative. Okay.
low the Steam user reviews got for this game.
18%! Oh. Oh.
On its
Well,
launch day.
at least
For a lot of
Concord has
reasons,
some help, you know.
Performance issues hurt the game outright, and humongously. A kind of confused audience couldn't believe that Jeff Keighley had been so excited to show off that he literally kept as the "and one more thing" for the biggest game reveal event of the entire year. Now you pair that with player numbers dropping off.
Oh my god. Oh my god. And you can tell that it's not fake either, because, like, these drops are consistent with, like, when, you know, like, like, when the US wakes up, when Britain wakes up, when Europe wakes up. These are oh, man. Oh, oh my god. Okay.
During the launch week, and you've got a clear narrative, one that begins to look a bit like Concord.
Oh, okay, I was going to say, oh, okay,
to do this video
holy
because now,
shit.
over a week later, a different view of the game is forming. Things are a bit more complex, and suffice to say, it at least seems that this team being independent and not being strapped down by being part of a big AAA publisher, well, it seems that that is a damn good thing. Let's get into it. When we ended our pre-launch coverage, we said Highguard could be a total shit show, or it could be the next game from the people who made Apex Legends and Titanfall.
It had every opportunity to be Overwatch 2 and fucking 3, but instead it was Highguard. Actually, do we even want Overwatch 3? Don't. Blizzard, don't add that one.
Equally incredible experience. And certainly if you look at the pure numbers, it's obvious, or it would seem obvious, that the former is true, that it is a shit show.
It is,
and it does feel like so many games we've seen before, right?
Hey, but here's the thing, though. I've actually seen some pretty decent reviews on it. Like, people who just think the game is just kind of like a nothing burger. It's kind of like just a game of all time. It is not the game of all time. It's not the next Overwatch. It's not the next Marvel Rivals. It is just meh. And then that's it. I'm pretty sure that was Critical's review of it as well.
Performance issues at launch, souring the game for many, and then what remains just doesn't really land with people. And it's an odd game. It's a weird hybrid of Capture the Flag with Rainbow Six Siege base defensing, but with Apex Legends gunplay and heroes. It's not clear where it fits, and it absolutely looks like, well, another multiplayer
I want someone in the comments to tell me, if he doesn't tell me on this, can someone explain why the fuck there's mining in the game? This is something I don't understand, I can't comprehend. Anyone in chat, anyone in YouTube comments, please tell me why there's mining in the game.
Game that stumbles and dies out pretty much immediately off the bat. And based on the biggest headlines, that would seem to be true. But it's a good thing we actually looked at the detail, because the reality here is way more interesting. Now, Highguard is a game that's ended up being divisive, but now the time's passed, there's a lot of detail and a lot of numbers that have changed. And that's what we need to talk about next.
Okay.
What you probably already know is that by a week, Highguard went from a concurrent player count in PC of 97,249 to a weekend high of just 15,000.
Yeah, but that's, like, here's the thing. I think that peak was literally only because of the Game Awards, and because everyone saw it on the Game Awards. It, like, kind of what's the term? Is it Streisand affected majiggy, and just went fucking skyrocketing upwards to a point of I need to play this game because it's not going to be out for longer than 2 weeks. We're gonna get in on the Concorde before the Concorde no longer flies, pretty much.
So going peak to peak, that's just under 90% of players gone within 7 days.
Yeah,
we don't know about the console numbers, but I think it seems unlikely.
Is that the biggest fall off in history, like, for a video game? Because I don't even think No Man's Sky was that bad when it released. People still played it for a few days, and it just it dwindled off fast. But I think it wasn't anywhere near like 7 days. Yeah, that's wild.
They'll return to that peak, or the general gaming audience will change their mind and suddenly come back to the game. But what's marked this story is a hostility in the reaction, at least from some circles. Now that sparked its own counter-reaction. We saw senior game leaders like Sven of Larian asking for critics to be less hurtful. Not hurtful as in, not.
I don't like people shitting on things others have created. Putting something out into the world makes you vulnerable, and that alone deserves respect. Even if you dislike this creation, it's easy to destroy things. It's a lot harder to build them. The best critics understand this. Even when they're being critical, they do their best not to be hurtful. I understand this as well. And I think, obviously, what didn't help these blokes is Jeff, well, was Jeff just, like, actually hyping up the game? Obviously that's not on him, but it's just, man, putting Titanfall and stuff like that on the the headlines from the devs of Titanfall and from the devs of blah blah blah, like, what were you expecting, man? And I mean, I do agree with Finn here. It's rough on both sides, because I think, customers are let down, but I don't think it's correct for people to be, overly, borderline harassing the devs. I think saying the game is mid, or it's shit, or it's good, or it's great, or it's bad, you can leave it at that and then, leave it alone. But going off on a tangent, for half an hour, like I've seen some people doing out there, Jesus Christ. Like, you need to just reevaluate it. Come on.
A good review, but I think it was the
I mean, and just real quick, you guys are YouTubers, streamers, you guys put yourselves out there on a daily basis. Like, you know how it is,
how scathing in a way.
And it's not as if these devs have done anything wrong.
Came off. Now, obviously for the devs, well, they just worked on the game. Now they've shipped the game. But then things got a bit more interesting as time went on, and as that initial drama began to die down. Because by the time that weekend rolled around, they had actually committed to a 5v5 mode, and as a permanent mode, all in response to player demand.
You've been asking, we're happy to share. 5v5 raid mode is here to stay. We appreciate everyone hopping over, blah, 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 blah. Fairly responsive 5v5 and helped inform our decision. Okay. I like this. Okay, so for those of you who weren't around for No Man's Sky, when it released, it was a shit show. A whole load of promises that were made to the public weren't made. And then eventually the game got better and better and better. Now it's one of the most highly rated games by players. Not I don't think by the numbers, but just in general by the player, like overall player base. The devs, Sean Murray, them lot are highly respected amongst just internet the internet in general. But okay, if we're copying Sean Murray, we're par for the course right now.
They confirmed that Ranked is coming, and they've shipped multiple rounds of patches. For some people, that'll fix some of their problems, though not all of them. But here's what's cool. When you look at the review data, you see that the story is truly developing in a new direction.
Looking to bet on the Super Bowl? Bitch has got your back with an epic
Bro,
offer.
I
Place the first touchdown,
don't
score a
want
bet,
to
and if it
bet
doesn't land,
my
$50 bonus
money.
cash on us. Download BitChat, the #1 app to bet on the NFL.
Oh.
R18, bet responsibly.
I don't want to go back to school.
The reviews then. The overall review score on Steam has climbed to 42% positive. That's a lot better than the opening of 18. And it means the game is now marked as mixed in Steam. And, well, a 30% move in 7 days is fairly impressive, especially for a game that started so heavily swung in one direction.
Look, due to the internet being the way the internet is, where it is just literally a crowd of sheep, don't try and put it any other way. You know it is, I know it is, everyone knows it is. This was always, I think the devs kind of expected this, but this was going to crash and burn regardless. Because everyone, when you are not in favor of the public, everyone is nitpicky, extraordinarily so. Including myself, you know, and I think it's quite right to be nitpicky, especially with a game like this that's had a huge amount of press. You guys have got to understand, old Jeff Keighley, you know, the Game Awards, pulls more viewers than the fucking Super Bowl for you Americans. They last year, or 2024's, 2025's, no, 2024's, they pulled 150 million average viewers on the Game Awards. That is an enormous viewership, a huge viewership, right? And so for old Jeffy to push this to us, the audience, without really having any like special thing about it, is going to piss people off.
But what's
it really
a bit more
is.
telling is that as the days have went on, we see that the ratio of positive to negative reviews has actually shifted substantially. So what that basically means is the initial kind of bomb of this game coming out that was loud, that got the whole internet riled up, that seemingly did lead to a lot of negative reviews. Probably a part of that is there's lots of people who wouldn't really suit this very niche, bizarrely designed...
This game, in my mind, has the same sort of weird... It's a bit like Rocket League in a way, not in terms of gameplay at all, but in terms of the way that the audience and player base, just general player base, would look at it. This game seems very niche and is quite weird, especially for a shooter. I've not really come across a shooter like this before. And I've been, you know, we've all been around the internet for a while. My youngest average viewer is fucking 18, so welcome, you youngins. But we've all been around the internet for a while. Some of you out there far longer than me. Far longer. Man, I've never seen a shooter like this. Maybe some of you oldies out there have. If you guys who are, you know, I'm 24, so you guys who want to partake in that response, if you guys are older than '02, that's when I was born, '02, then leave a comment or in chat if you guys are maybe a bit older. Tell me if you guys have seen anything like this in the past, because I've scrolled through all of the fucking gun games I know of, and there's just nothing like this.
Shooter. So it wasn't exactly hitting its, like, prime intended audience. And a lot of people even looked at, say, Jeff giving it such a big spot at the Game Awards and kind of
Exactly.
said, Jeff, have you just, like, exposed this game to an audience far larger than the one that it's really targeting? Therefore putting the
Exactly.
game in a position of being marketed to people who basically...
This is the same thing as when, so for you guys who don't know, when I can't remember if it was Kingsfield or what was it? It might have been Dark Souls 1. One of the first games Miyazaki ever made, he took to Sony to have them promote it and stuff on their game store. And of course, Sony's a huge platform, so this would be a very, very big deal. And I believe at the time it was Shohei Yoshida or something like that. I can't remember his name, but the CEO of Sony decided to play Dark Souls 1, I think it was, and he said it was the worst game he'd ever played, right? Now look where we are. And this is the same sort of shit, so we might be on the up and up here.
wouldn't really like it and probably wouldn't even naturally find it. So there is an aspect of that. I just think it's interesting that as the big headline grabbing news story has died down, that the review ratio has changed substantially. Because of course, when we talk about that headline number, it's probably more than 42% by the time you watch this video. Like, that's a slow number to shift. But if you look at the day-by-day positivity-negativity split, that's changing a lot. And then there's what we see when we filter the reviews by time played. Because as it turns out, when you remove the reviews that are only from 0 to 2 hours played, well, the numbers do look a hell of a lot different.
That is very interesting. So there is a community for this game. That is good. You know.
Now, obviously, if a game isn't intuitive and people just abandon it within 2 hours, that is a serious problem.
Yeah.
But there could be something to say about how it seems that as people play this game, they do indeed seem to have a better opinion of it. Obviously, there is a humongous sampling bias whenever you slice the reviews like that, but from the perspective of the game developer, well, the people who enjoy the game as they keep playing are the ones that they actually will want to market to and care about. And
yeah, but this is true, but it is still a massive uphill battle. Like a massive, massive uphill battle, because they've got to get the opinions of this like small niche community positive enough, not too dissimilarly to Dark Souls 1's community, positive enough that they will then go and reinforce that opinion outside of the scope of what the devs want, right? Like, the devs can reach this niche community. The community has to branch out into other communities and go about things like that. That is the hard part. You have to make these people so in love with this game that it causes their friends to want to play it with them.
That cohort is strong enough and expands, then they should be okay. But that's by no means a comeback story in itself, because I don't think there's a massive renaissance coming for this game. Like,
Neither
to
do
hit
I.
70% positivity would require substantial amounts of only positive reviews.
Exactly.
That would take a hell of a lot of time. Now, the first thing to look at, and it's one of the biggest structural things that a game can face, is where the reviews are. And what we see is that Highguard reviews are 75% English language, which is actually good for them, because the Chinese and Russian reviews tend to be really harsh on per performance, far more so than English reviews.
Yes.
So that'll insulate them from some of the negative impact here.
That is
but
good.
Obviously the performance problems are really rather huge. The day one reviews are absolutely dominated by them. This is problems like the performance limited.
So I watched a little bit of the Highguard stuff before I did end up in eventually caving, because I was like, I'm not going to miss out on this. And again, you guys know I have a very, very high-end PC with high-end monitors, you know, just high-end equipment all around, high-end Wi-Fi, and it did not run. It was lagging, it was stuttering every few minutes, it was like causing major problems with any time I tried to record it, because the one thing that I do to stress test certain games is to try and get just a small snippet of it on my on OBS here, which I have open on this recording right now. And currently, I'll show you guys. You can see here, like, there is nothing, like, at all that is problematic. We've been going for quite a while because I've had to take a few phone calls, but there is nothing here that is problematic at all. We've missed 0 frames, we've got nothing. We're sitting at a 60 FPS, 1.2 milliseconds to render. Like, we're fine. We're more than fine. Um but, and big big but here, when I was recording Hightail and this game, and I believe the other one, what was the other, I can't remember. Anyway, Hightail, this game, um the amount of frames lost to due to rendering lag was in the like tens of thousands over the course of about maybe an hour ish. It was in the tens of thousands, and currently this recording is 31 minutes in. We have zero, nothing. So yeah.
Customization of things like FOV sliders. Come on, industry, FOV sliders should be standard. Total Biscuit fought for us on that one, and I really did think the world had changed.
Yeah,
There's been
FOV
weird
needs to be a
stuttering,
thing in
crashes,
modern
server
shooters.
problems, and mouse acceleration issues that the devs still can't find, which is really bad for a competitive multiplayer game, especially one that looks like Highguard. So that's obviously unforgivable for many, because this
Yeah.
isn't some janky co-op of RV There Yet, or
Yeah.
a single-player game with a dev pedigree like Cyberpunk. No, performance is not negotiable for a game like this. That is
Competitive games need to be balanced. Like, it should just be, you need to, so from, this is the way I see it, okay? When you're building a game where balance doesn't necessarily need to be a factor, you actually have a much easier time, because you are building from the start to the finish, and you can do it in any way you want, so long as it goes on along with your story, and as long as things don't get too out of hand, it's fine. The problem with balanced games, like balanced multiplayer games especially, is you are building from the center outward, and no one knows like what sort of style your game is going to take until you've sort of reached that third outermost ring, if you will. And each ring has different sort of things, like what's the objective of the game, let's make a map, let's build it, let's make sure it's mirrored, blah 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 blah, so forth, so on. And I think it is really hard to balance games these days competitively, because players are just so fucking refined. If you notice, back in the day, balancing was awful, but also the players were shit. Players were not good at games, so it didn't really matter. But
competitive.
nowadays,
And for many, if it doesn't
where
run at
you,
120
as I've said in the past, spawn in as good as your worst game, it's rough on you.
FPS out of the gate and you don't immediately enjoy it, why the hell bother investing the time? But there's something more specific to Highguard that does make this matter more. Because yes, players who joined at launch immediately crashed and then couldn't connect to a server to complete the mandatory tutorial.
I didn't have to go through this because I bought it later on, but I heard this was a really bad, people were waiting hours to get in.
Would almost certainly, have played the game for under half an hour and would have reasonably left a negative review. But the majority of negative reviews exist within that window of 10 minutes to 2 hours. Now, in that first 10 to 30 minutes, you could end up in a literal unskippable tutorial that you're struggling to get through because of crashes.
Yeah.
Now, that unskippable tutorial is clearly there because the developers needed to communicate the many mechanics and systems of this game, so that no team would be hamstrung by having one player in their game that just didn't understand. And even the positive reviews make that kind of clear, that Highguard is a weird, niche experience, a game that takes multiple matches before it clicks. Maybe many multiple matches. And those matches can last up to half an hour. So that's a lot to ask of someone. And if you think about it, right, imagine if everyone just hopped into Summoner's Rift, right, League of Legends, with zero meta knowledge, zero anything that is built up. The first, hour or two would be a bit of a janky, chaotic experience. A bunch of that is happening here. The metas haven't developed, and those performance issues, unskippable tutorial, etc., those all just compounded in a really bad way. And because of that, the negativity makes sense. But as I said, if you filter reviews to only the players who actually, you could say, gave the game a fair shake, with the asterisk that in this case fair would mean pushing through performance issues and crashes that I do think are quite unacceptable, well then the picture does look to be better for this game. That's the most important factor here, because the people who played Highguard for an hour and felt so passionate
Yeah, Apex Siege of Legends, yeah.
that they had to leave a negative comment
Fair enough.
are probably not the people who should have been playing Highguard whatsoever. And maybe if Highguard had have been labeled early access, they would have known, oh, maybe I shouldn't expect a full, big, polished experience. And that is where we get to Mr. Jeff Keighley.
Yeah.
You can't separate this from the reveal. 171 million people were able to learn about Highguard.
Oh my god. Okay, so it was big. Holy shit.
Because of the Game Awards appearance. The developers were friends with Jeff Keighley, who liked the game in testing and gave them a slot on literally the biggest stage in gaming. Highguard was exposed to the largest audience you could find, and with a trailer that the CEO, Dusty Welch, told PC Gamer could have been, quote, a better trailer that wasn't about entertaining, and instead could have been one, you know, explaining what the hell Highguard is, so the people wouldn't.
Right, I think I want to make this a thing, okay? I'm going to tell you guys about this, and I want this to be a thing from now on, okay? Do not promote your game if it is a heavy combat style game, similar to similar to a Rocket League, similar to a Dark Souls, similar to a Warframe, similar to yep. Don't show me them unless they have proper gameplay with them. And I think that really is just a big thing. I have vied for this for years at this point, where I think players should get the gameplay trailer before the other trailer.
Look at it and think, oh dear, it's another sci-fi fantasy slop hero shooter. So, did Jeff Keighley cause all of this by asking them to spin up a trailer and them getting this slot? Should Highguard have been seen by that many people? Well, the devs at Wildlight believed in the game that they had made, and they hoped they would find some kindred spirits who would agree with them. They had a chance to speak to the largest audience in gaming, they took that chance. And rightly so. I mean, going by the idea that, say, a year ago, if you told us that an extraction shooter would have been one of the best-selling, most loved mass-market games of 2025, well, just about everyone would have doubted you based on how people treat that genre, and even how it's seen as being sort of niche, even though it's a big niche. So we see that odd games can succeed, meaning if you're doing one of those odd games, yeah, why not take a punt at the Game Awards, especially if you're not having to pay the pretty big amount of money that that usually costs.
What? Highguard did not pay for its famous. What? That Highguard did not have to pay a hugely coveted spot at all. Reportedly, showrunner just really liked the game and offered it to them. Really? What the fuck? Okay.
But the problem with Highguard is, it's not easily communicated. It's a game that ended up being a strange, niche, FPS nerd mode, and the devs coming up with the game call it a raid shooter. What does raid shooter mean? That's not a genre that anyone's really heard of. Maybe they'd think of, I don't know, the raids that Call of Duty had.
I will say, just really quick, like, to hand it to them, they have brought around a new generation of game. And I want you guys to really keep a look on this, okay? Because I have a theory. I have a game theory. Literally a game theory, right? This will be the game that crawled so a game in like 2028, 2027 could run. That is my theory. Either this game is going to get off these fucking legs and actually start moving, or he's going to be the game that allowed it to happen.
recent entries. Add to that the performance problems, and for many, they obviously bounced off it hard. Now, it has evidently resonated with some people, and while the player numbers are down, well, for a new IP multiplayer game from an independent studio that, doesn't have the marketing budget of an Electronic Arts, getting 5,000 concurrent players is a decent enough achievement.
It is not bad.
Because in an industry where, last year alone, we covered the complete collapse of games like Splitgate and Wildgate, it's really not good for the Gate games, is it? Well, Highguard's devs did gamble
I
with
completely fucking forgot about Splitgate. That was that one where you essentially competitive Portal, right? Huh. Interesting.
odds, and now that's the bit we need to talk about. How are their odds? Are they screwed? Well, in light of all this chaos, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier asked Dusty Welch if the Game Awards reveal was a bad idea, and he said that he does not know yet. Here's the quote: "The toxicity is challenging, and it's debatable whether we would have had more or less or the same by not doing the Game Awards. I don't know, and we'll never know the answer to that. But I think that's an..."
I think, if I'm going to be honest, I think that if they were put in one of the starting slots at the Game Awards, like one of the very, very, very beginning slots for the Game Awards, not in the pre-game show, because I think the game show, the pre-game show is a little too underwhelming for these guys. I think they deserve a bit more. But I think if, instead of putting it in the final slot and having Jeff drum it up, I think putting it somewhere in the middle, maybe in behind Mael, what's it, Jennifer, what's her face? You know what I'm talking about, the actress for Mael winning. If they put it somewhere like there, I think it would have gone over better. Just personally though. I don't, obviously we won't ever know, but I think personally it would have gone over a little bit better for them.
Angle that has to be considered going forward for anyone in game development. And based on that, I have questions for you. Do you know what Rogue Point is? Maybe you don't, because it's a new co-op shooter from the people who made Black Mesa, and it's coming out next week. Do you know what Speedball is? I certainly don't. And by the way, I didn't know what Rogue Point was either.
You know what?
Speedball.
You know what? I'm proud of myself on this one. I know what both of these are.
Is the newest game from the Sniper Elite people. That's Rebellion Games. That's them resurrecting a classic IP, and the game has been in early access for 2 years. Let's do another one. Do you know what Out of Action is?
Yes.
Well, it's this. It's a pretty sick looking solo dev PvP FPS that's already sold 10,000 copies. You probably did not know about those games. I certainly didn't. But we all knew about Highguard. So for better or worse, that Game Awards reveal made sure that nearly 100,000 people tried playing the game at launch. And even if a large number of those people bounced off it, when we look at the review splits as the days have rolled on, we see that they're getting more positive. When you look at the community response to the devs, say, doing the 5v5 experiment and then saying, okay, 5v5 is going to be a permanent feature of the game, what you see is people saying, oh, okay, it seems you guys can actually move pretty quick and change things up, and it seems there's a little bit of respect going to them for that. So I can't say whether Game Awards was a mistake.
Which, by the way, fucking deserved, honestly. Look, at the end of the day, I have no problems with the Highguard devs, and quite frankly, I don't think many of the raving reviewers do. The problem is just solely with the fact that this was hyped up to be the biggest thing of all time, and I mean, it's just not. It fits a niche community, and that community likes it. Big whoop.
But I do think that this particular group of devs were never not going to make a multiplayer shooter. It's quite literally what they're good at.
Yes.
And many of us, say, would have wanted a Titanfall 3, complete with its big campaign and all of that stuff, especially given how good the campaign of Titanfall 2 was. But Electronic Arts was not going to make that game. And going off on their own, that type of game would be too high budget. for a dev studio like this to make. So, yeah, they were always going to try and do something like this. As much as it's a very strange game mode that takes a while to click for people, I'm glad it's not just another sloppy hero shooter.
Yeah, I'm
glad
agreed.
that they're trying to take some sort of spin on what an FPS can end up being.
As I said, I think that this will be the game that crawled so another game can run, unfortunately. Like, these guys are going to pave the way for a very... How I put this? These guys are going to pave the way, in my mind, for a new type of shooter that does not have the same degree of chaos as your Apex or your Fortnite or your anything. It like, I predict that in 4 or 5 years there's going to be a new type of shooter that the games, like the individual games, will last a while, like a long while. We're talking hours potentially. And there will be a massive map that does slowly, well, it might not even shrink, but there'll be a target for every player to go to. But getting to that target will take a while. And I don't mean physically. There might be multiple steps to do it, and you end up crossing into other players, kind of like how Sea of Thieves plays, where like there's a sort of like everyone can go out and do their own thing, but there is a emphasis on world events. And I think that's kind of what might happen here, where you could have like a Sea of Thieves style game with world events that players interact at, and maybe it's not permadeath, who knows.
So, I think Highguard was always going to end up being some sort of game like this. The money and the interest weren't changing from the developer side, and they were confident that they could interest some part of the shooter market. They just ended up speaking to too many people and not setting clear enough expectations of what would come.
They needed player testing. Like here's the thing. When Jeff said that like they are very, very deep into development, I think to a lot of like game devs out there, and especially people just in general who play a lot of games to a high degree, this was a bit of a red flag, because if you truly are that deep into development, right, you don't have player testing, you don't have like any opinions to go off of, and that is dangerous. You need to know what you're getting yourself into.
Launch, because their trailer didn't really explain what the game mode was properly. But here is what's worth watching. The devs have been agile, permanent 5v5, ranked confirmed, multiple patches in a week.
I want to say these devs by no means have any hostility from me or even I reckon the majority of people. I think that the devs really just caught a bad wind with Highguard releasing, and they were immediately not the crowd favorite, which is again another huge issue. We need to look as a community, as the gaming community in general. We need to follow their actions and see what they do. If their actions line up with, the engoodening of Highguard, that's a good reference, by the way, for those of you who know. If we get, well, let's put it like this: if we get the engoodening of Highguard in like 2030 by Internet Historian, then we'll know what it was, a W, right?
They have robust plans for all their seasons and stuff. That looks promising, and this agility is likely the upside of being independent. There's no corporate approval chain. If something needs to change, they can just go and do it. They can just fix things. And that means that Highguard's story is really about one question. Is it better to guarantee people know about Highguard, but risk attracting people who won't click with the game? Or would their original plan, a shadow drop of the game, just out of nowhere, but with not the marketing budget of an EA, just doing that and hoping the FPS hardcore would stumble upon it?
I don't think. Here's the problem, and I do. This is a big consideration to make when talking about this, especially with you guys in chat. These Highguard has very similar art styles to your Apex Legends, and it's like a cross between Apex Legends and Fortnite, right? and it has a very almost Concordish graphic design, if you will. The art style itself, Fortnite Apex with a Concordish graphic design, I don't know what that means, but hopefully you guys resonate with that in some way. I know what I mean by it, but I'm just hoping you guys do. And I think that alone probably would have turned away nearly everyone. I like, there would have been a few people who would have seen it and been like, okay, fuck it. But I don't think it's the wrong idea to the devs to try and get a slot in the Game Awards, but I think getting that last slot was just not the move.
Would that have been better? I don't know. You don't know. And the truth is, none of us can know, because that didn't happen. But there are indie devs right now wondering if they should also take a similar roll of the dice. Because just think about those 3 others that I mentioned, and think, did I know about that game?
Yes, I
How
did.
could I have came across that game? That's the question we need to be asking, because it seems that overall the largest problem in gaming is one of discoverability. I think there generally are people out there who will want to play the game that you're making. The problem is just reaching them. What do you think? Have you managed to stick around through the performance issues? Are you actually enjoying Highguard? Does 5v5 make the really big map feel better? Let me know in the comments. It's an increasingly stagnant industry, so I'm at least happy that some people are trying something new.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn about how the industry actually is literally stagnant, and how it being stagnant is actually good news compared to what most people were expecting, watch this video next.
Right. So there are a few things that I obviously disagree on with this video, but overall, the sentiment is much the same, that the Highguard devs don't deserve the amount of shit that they're getting. Obviously, it's their product and not them, but the overall consensus from the gaming community isn't going to change for a while, you know? It's just not. I mean, literally immediately. Like, you see this. And I'm not evading guilt of this as well. My thumbnail's probably going to look somewhat similar, but again, the result of Highguard, you know, just not being favorable by the community because of the situation it was put in, is really rough. That is incredibly rough. But anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully you guys had enjoyed. There just hasn't been much content that I think is worth covering as of late, and I'd rather not put up, you know, crap, just things. So that's why we have not had a few videos for a while. So anyways, we'll catch you on the next one. See ya.